Hello, everybody.
Well, good afternoon. We are here on the record in the matter of the City of East Lansing versus Adam Houston. This is case number 24-7440M. This is the date and time set for an arraignment. May I have appearances for the record?
Good afternoon, Your Honor. Robert Eastley on behalf of the city.
Melissa Vachon on behalf of Mr. Houston, who appears separately from the East Lansing Police Department.
Thank you, and good afternoon, Mr. Houston.
Good afternoon.
I can hear and see you clearly. Can you hear and see me and the lawyers?
Yeah, I can. I would also like to let you know something too.
Mr. Houston,
Okay.
not right now, okay?
All right.
Very good. Thank you. Appreciate that, Mr. Houston. So the court would first, before we begin arraignment, needs to make a disclosure. The court understands that there has been ex parte communication that was initiated by the city attorney between the city attorney, an East Lansing police officer, and the court. This is a violation of Michigan Rule of Professional Conduct 3.5. It is also a violation of the Code of Judicial Conduct. Ms. Vachon, it's my understanding this happened yesterday, October 3rd at lunchtime, when Mr. Easterly brought a East Lansing police officer to the judicial staff, buzzed, and Judge Babcock answered the door. I think that there were some matters pertain to scheduling and administrative matters, but there also were information conveyed to the court regarding allegations about Mr. Houston and his threat to public safety. So on that, Mr. Easterly.
Your Honor, I disagree that there was an ex parte communication.
Was Ms. Vachon with you when you talked to Judge Babcock yesterday?
She was not.
Then how is it not ex parte?
Well, number one, he did not have any representation yesterday.
He's represented by the public defender on 2 other files before this court. And you would know as well as I know, every defendant in Ingham County gets an attorney.
That's correct that they're entitled to an attorney. I don't know that I knew that he was represented on other cases, and that certainly does not apply to this case. He did not have representation on this case. Secondly, the communication was about scheduling.
Mr. Easterly, you're an officer of the court. Are you telling me that was the only thing that was talked about?
No, that's not the only thing that was talked about. I believe that the officer referenced.
So let's be honest and forthright.
I am being honest and forthright, and I would object to any indication otherwise.
You just told me it was about scheduling, and now you're saying it was not just about scheduling, which is exactly what I said.
Once again, Your Honor, my communication was regarding whether or not an afternoon arraignment would be possible.
Did you give the court information that it would not otherwise have outside of the proper channels where Mr. Houston would be represented?
I don't know that I did, Your Honor. What I was about to say before I was interrupted was that the officer referenced that Mr. Houston had been picked up the day before, and that there were concerns that he had assaulted officers as a part of that incident, and that there were concerns with regard to why we wanted to be heard for arraignment. That is the content that I am aware of. And I don't believe that to be a violation or an ex parte communication.
Ms. Vachon.
Your Honor, it sounds like an ex parte conversation to me. I understand that we were not representing him on this file, but we do represent him on different files. And even if we didn't, I think then that Mr. Houston himself would have the ability to be part of that conversation.
That's a very good point. Mr. Houston.
Yes, I would like to let you know that the officers arrested me.
Mr. Houston, right now we're not discussing the case, okay? Remember?
One moment, I'll let her know. I seen you on Monday, and 2 days later, they said that you put a warrant out for my arrest, which is why I did not comply with officers, because I told them I seen you on Monday, and they said, well, this is why we're arresting you, because they said you have a warrant for R&O. That's why I didn't comply with the officers.
Okay, Mr. Houston, this isn't the time for you to state things like this on the record, and we're not there yet. But Mr. Easterly, on the ex parte communication, I'm concerned that you don't think that this is a problem. And if you don't know it's a problem, I'm telling you now that it is, that any individual that comes before this court as a defendant deserves to have an attorney. And as Ms. Vachon points out, if they decline representation, they represent themselves. When you have communication with the court outside of either the represented counsel or the defendant, that is ex parte communication. And I am concerned that we need to have this discussion here and that you are not acknowledging that.
Well, once again, Your Honor, the only thing that I relayed to the court was whether or not it would be possible to have an afternoon arraignment still at that in that time frame. And there was a reason.
And once again, Mr. Easterly, you're an officer of the court and you need to watch your words. That is not the only thing. And if we need to have Judge Babcock or other witnesses, I mean, is that what you want to do? Or are you acknowledging that there was other information conveyed? I'm not saying that what scheduling was discussed, and I stated that at the outset, but that was not the only thing conveyed. And even if it was only scheduling, Mr. Easterly, just for us all to know, that is a carve out, and the canons of judicial conduct do permit limited ex parte communication for scheduling, but only if the judge reasonably believes that no party or counsel will gain a procedural or tactical advantage, and the judge makes the provision to promptly notify all parties. So even if it was just procedural or administrative, this still needs to happen. I still have a duty to disclose this. But back to that, it was my understanding that it was not just procedural. On that, Mr. Easterly.
I've stated it and I'll state it again. That was my communication to the court. What I also stated is that the officer expressed that the defendant had been picked up the day before, had been arrested the day before, and that he had concerns for public safety and for safety of officers.
Okay, so that's not procedural. That has to do with information that would be relevant to a court in making a bond determination. There are proper procedures, and I would think you would know them on if you need to be heard on bond, and there are proper ways to get before the court, such as we're doing now. But ringing the doorbell at lunchtime and talking to a judge with an officer and providing this information is not the proper way to do it. Ms. Vachon, anything further? Do you think that there's any other remedy or record we need to make here?
Not at this time, Your Honor.
Okay, are you ready to proceed?
Yes.
Mr. Houston, this is an arraignment, and the purpose of this hearing is for me to inform you of the charges against you, the maximum possible penalties, and your rights. You're charged in this misdemeanor complaint in count 1 with the crime of disorderly conduct by obstructing or resisting a police officer. And that is a misdemeanor punishable by up to 90 days in jail and a fine of $500. In count 2, you're charged with trespassing. That is also a misdemeanor punishable by up to 90 days in jail and a fine of $500. Mr. Houston, do you understand these 2 charges and the maximum possible penalty?
Yeah, I do.
You have a right to an attorney to assist you. If you can't afford an attorney, one will be provided for you at public expense. Ms. Vachon, is Mr. Houston making an application to your office on this case?
Yes, Your Honor.
Mr. Houston, you need to stay in good contact with Ms. Vachon and her office. And Mr. Houston, you have a right to a trial where you would have many rights available to you. Ms. Vachon, have you reviewed the trial rights with your client?
Yes, Your Honor, he will enter a not guilty plea.
So we'll set this for a pre-trial conference on October 10th at 1:45. Unless Ms. Vachon and Mr. Easterly, Mr. Houston has a pretrial in the other 2 files, which are state cases, on October 9th. Would you like the court to look to see if we could combine those, or do you have a preference, Ms. Vachon?
Yes, Your Honor, if we could have it on the same day, that would be best.
Okay. Ms. Lewis, could we have a pretrial on the 9th?
Your Honor, would this be on the record or just off the record?
I think right now it's just off the record.
Okay.
So can I make it at October 9th at 10:45?
Yes, you can.
Okay, thank you. And that is the next court date. And Mr. Easterly, would you like to be heard now on bond?
I would, Your Honor. I understand that Mr. Houston is on bond for a series of other files. I've also come to understand that there are some concerns that he has threatened police officers, and one of the allegations is that he was involved in a tussle with police officers the day before or 2 days before this incident. So there are some concerns with public safety. And so we would ask that you would set a monetary bond in this case.
Okay, thank you very much. Ms. Vachon, anything on bond from you?
Yes, Your Honor, I would request a personal bond for Mr. Houston. I know the court saw him just a few days ago. He's aware of his court date next week. I don't have any concerns about his appearance as it relates to community safety. Mr. Houston did provide me now with an address that he'll be staying at. If he is released, he'll be staying with his mom in Lansing. He also told me that he's engaged with CMH. He goes every 14 days. So I would ask the court, instead of requiring that he post money, instead order that he comply with all CMH recommendations. With his financial status, I believe that any monetary bond would essentially be a no bond in this case, as he would not be able to post. He has other pending cases, if that's what Mr. Easterly is referring to. That is charged as an attempt, and I have reviewed the discovery, and it certainly wasn't a tussle. So I would just ask that the court consider that.
Okay. Mr. Easterly, on the defense proposal that Mr. Houston be released with orders to comply with CMH?
Are there orders currently that he would be released directly to CMH right now?
Ms. Vachon?
No, Your Honor, he just on his own. I believe he was ordered to comply through CMH, but that probate period has ended. Now he goes on his own every 14 days.
Okay.
Yeah, I guess my response to that would be the same, Judge, that I believe he was arraigned a day or so before this and still found himself picking up new charges. So unless there is some date certain that he's supposed to be reporting to some component with CMH, I would restate my request.
Okay, very good. Ms. Vachon, if you know, is there an appointment at CMH before our pretrial, which is just next Wednesday?
He has to check his phone for the next appointment date, so he was unable to tell me which date he's going next.
Okay, understood. That is perhaps information you could have available for the pretrial.
For sure, yes.
Okay, thank you. So Mr. Houston, I see you and I'm not ignoring you, but it's just in your best interest that you don't speak at this time about anything that has to do with the underlying. So I appreciate your cooperation, Mr. Houston. So Mr. Houston, the court needs to consider two main factors when I set bond, and the one that is most pressing here is community safety. You now have a series of cases. There are 3 cases in which it is alleged that you are disobeying orders of trespass orders that prohibit you from particular places, and that then when you have contact with the police that you are obstructing or resisting. Given the history here, the court will order a cash bond. I think that the presumption that he receives a personal bond is rebutted for those reasons stated. So Mr. Houston, your bond is $500, cash or surety. You're subject to the following conditions. You must appear as directed. You may not leave the state of Michigan without permission of this court. You must not commit any crime while you are on bond to this court. You must not enter into the premises at 311 Grove Street in the city of East Lansing, and that is where the 7-Eleven is. And you must comply with all other orders of this court and any other court. You must not purchase, possess any weapon, and You must not engage in any assaultive, harassing, or threatening behavior towards any individual. With that, anything further from the city?
Not at this time.
Ms. Vachon, anything further from you?
No, Your Honor, thank you.
Okay, good luck, Mr. Houston. And I should have asked Ms. Vachon and Mr. Easterly, is this off the record pretrial, or did you want, is there any reason why it should be on the record, the pretrial on next Wednesday?
Yes, I'd ask that we do conduct it on the record for purposes of, potentially for purposes of bond.
Okay, so Ms. Vachon, it'll be a on the record pretrial.
Thank you, Your Honor.
And so we'll make sure Mr. Houston is present and set up a polycom for him. Okay, very good. That's all for this record.
Be safe, be well, sleep sweet, and much love.